Okay guys, now we are on part 2 for our third topic, which is the money-time relationship. Now if you can recall, part 1 was simple interest. Now this time on part 2, we are on compound interest. Now what is compound interest? For compound interest, it means that the interest for an interest period is calculated on the principal plus the total amount of interest accumulated in the previous periods. Or it is also known as interest on top of interest. Now, why is it called interest on top of interest? So, to basically know the difference between compound interest and simple interest, we have to make an example. Okay? So, basic comparison between simple interest and compound interest. First, we have a simple interest cash flow diagram example with borrowed amount of 1,000 pesos and interest of 10% simple interest for 5 years. So meaning you have borrowed an amount of 1,000 pesos and it will be paid after 5 years, wherein it is under a 10% simple interest. Now in our cash flow diagram here, as you can see, here our 1,000 pesos is arrow up. Okay? Why it's arrow up? Because we are going to follow the borrower's viewpoint or borrower's point of view. So, when you are the borrower, of course, when you're going to borrow an amount of 1,000 pesos, it means it's a cash inflow or the cash will go to you. Okay? So, it's a positive process. Since the cash goes to you, it's a positive process, meaning the arrow is going up for positive process. Then you have 1,000 pesos for the borrowed amount. And for 5 years, you have first, second, third, fourth, fifth year. Now, under simple interest, you only have 100 pesos, which is the 10% of the 1,000 pesos. So, every year, for simple interest, there will be an interest of 100 pesos. So, 100 pesos interest on the first year, 100 pesos interest on the second year, 100 pesos interest on the third year, 100 pesos interest on the fourth year, and lastly, 100 pesos interest on the fifth year. So, if you're going to add up all the interests per year, your future amount from your initial 1,000 pesos will become 1,500 pesos. So, this is a simple interest. Now, what is with compound interest? For compound interest, okay, we have here compound interest cash flow diagram example with borrowed amount of 1,000 pesos and interest of 10% compound interest for 5 years. So it's still the same. You have borrowed amount of 1,000, the same interest of 10%, and the same time of 5 years. The only difference is before, you only have simple interest, 10% simple interest. While this one, it's the same 10% but it's compound interest. Okay? So again, you have the borrowed amount of 1,000 pesos. Okay? For compound interest on the first year, of course, 10%. Okay? Now, 10% of 100 is, of course, 100 pesos. So, this will be the interest on the first year. But the difference for compound interest is this interest on the first year will be added back to the principal. So, meaning your 100 pesos after the first year will be added to the 1,000 pesos. Now, your new principal after 1 year will be 1,100 pesos. So, this will be your new principal and you will not look back to the 1,000 pesos anymore because you will have a new principal of 1,100 pesos. Okay? So, this is for the first year. Then, moving on to the second year. For the second year, again, another 10%. But take note, you will not proceed with, you will not look back with the 1,000 pesos, but you will consider now the 1,100 pesos. So 10% of 1,100, that is 110 pesos. So this is the interest on the second year. And again, this interest will be added back to the previous principal, which was 1,100. So 1,100 plus 110 will become 1,210 pesos. Now, this will be your new principal after 2 years. Same same process. Another 10% compound interest for the third year. Okay? So, for the 10%, you will consider now the 1,210. So, 10% of 1,210, that will be 121 pesos. So, this will be the interest on the third year, which is again, then added back to the principal. So, 121 plus 1,210, that becomes 1,331. So this will be again your new principal after the third year. Then another 10% for the fourth year. So 10% of 1,331, that is 133.1. So again, this is the interest on the fourth year, which is again added back to the principal, which now your principal becomes 1,464.1. Okay? And then another 10% for the fifth year. So 10% for 1,464.1, that is 146.41. So this will be the interest for the fifth year. So it will be added back to the principal. But this time, since this is the last year, so you will have your future amounts. If you're going to add 146.41 to 1,464.1, then the future amount after 5 years will be 1,610.51 pesos. So this is the difference between a compound interest and a simple interest. For simple interest, simple, just plain, you have 10%. Okay, every year 10%, every year 10%. Considering your original principal. But for compound interest, okay, here your 100 pesos interest will go to your principal. Okay, then another interest go to principal, another interest go to principal. So meaning, your interest earns another interest. Your interest that earns another interest will earn another interest. Your interest that earns interest, which also earned interest, will earn another interest. So that's why it's called interest on top of interest. Sa Bisaya pa, nagpatong-patong imuhang interest. So, interest dere mo patong dere, ang napatongan nga interest dere mo patong na sa dere, na ang napatong nga interest dere nga napatong sa before, mo patong na sa dere. So that's why it's called again interest on top of interest. So I believe now you understand what's the basic difference between a compound interest and a simple interest. Now, let's proceed with how to solve compound interest. Okay, now in this slide, I have made a table depicting the derivation of the formula for compound interest. So, let's discuss it for one by one. First, you have period 1, you have the principal. Principal or present worth or price is just the same, no? They are the same in definition or in meaning. So, principal P, then the interest of the principal P, that will be I times P. So, in the future, you will have to add up the principal plus the interest. So, that means P plus P times I. So, taking out the common P, it will become P times 1 plus I. And then again, as I've said, the future amount of the first period will become the present on the next period. So, P times 1 plus I will become the present amount for the second period, which is P times 1 plus I again. With the interest, so P times 1 plus I times I. If you're going to add the two, it will basically become P times 1 plus I squared. Okay, moving on the third period, it will become P times 1 plus I cubed. So, as you can see, on the first period, P times 1 plus I, of course, here, it's assumed that it has an exponent of 1. On the second period, P times 1 plus I, an exponent of 2. On the third period, P times 1 plus I, an exponent of 3. So, how about on the nth period? So, basically, just the same, P times 1 plus I, but an exponent of n. Or P times 1 plus I to the power of n. Okay? Now, if we're going to determine the future or the present, so again, for the cash flow, if you have a present amount, the future amount will be P times 1 plus I to the power of N. But what if vice versa? What if you have a future amount, you want to know what was the present amount? So, just utilize this formula, we can get P equals F times 1 plus I to the power of negative N. Now, what is N? Take note, N is the number of interest periods. Meaning, kano sa magsigig interest. Okay? So, for example, it will have an interest of yearly. So, yearly, it will take an interest. Okay? Or let's say, monthly. Monthly, it will take an interest. So, that is N, or number of interest periods. Now, mathematically, N is equal to M times T. What is M and T? So, M is the number of compoundings or interest periods in a year, and T is, of course, the length of time in years. So, what does it mean by the number of compoundings or interest periods in a year? So, muna akong pasabot nga, how many times it will happen? How many times will it gain interest? For example, when you say yearly, so it will gain interest every year. When you say monthly, it will gain interest every month. So that is what it means by the number of compoundings or interest periods, M. Okay? So we now have the formula for the future amount of the compound interest and the present amount of the compound interest. Okay? Now, in compound interest, there are two types. Basically, two types of interest. Okay? For, recall no, sa simple interest, isa lang to. Simple lang. Simple interest. Okay? Mora. Kung naayun sa interest da sa imong problem, mora na imong rate of interest. But for compound interest, there are basically two types of interest. First, you have the nominal rate of interest. This nominal rate of interest is the interest with the actual number of compoundings in a year. So, as I've said, pwede man di ay mahitabo no nga imong interest will happen monthly, your interest will happen yearly, your interest will happen, let's say, semi-annually. So, you have to determine what is the actual number of compoundings in a year. So, to determine the nominal rate of interest, we have the formula I is equal to R over M. So, if we're going to compare this to simple interest, ang given nga interest sa simple interest ay na diretso. Pero for compound interest, your I is basically the rate of interest given in the problem divided by the number of compoundings M. So you have to consider the number of compoundings because remember, for compound interest, pwede mahitabo nga monthly, pwede mahitabo nga quarterly, pwede mahitabo nga yearly. Okay? So, pero sa simple interest, usara to, kung yearly ra gyud. More gyud to. So, mo na nga kailangan nato ma-determine ang nominal rate of interest I. Now, this will be the formula for I that we're going to use in compound interest. So, again, where I is the nominal rate of interest, R is the given interest rate, and M is the number of compoundings or interest periods in a year. So, with this formula, okay, if we're going to add this up to the previous formula of F equals P times 1 plus I to the power of N, and remember that N is equal to M times T, we now have our formula to become F is equal to P times 1 plus, remember this I here, but I equals R over M, so this will be 1 plus R over M to the power of, remember this N here. So instead of N, remember N is equal to M times T, so we now have here M times T. So this will now be our final formula for the compound interest. So F equals P times 1 plus R over M to the power of M times T. Now, how about katong P, sir? How about ang P equals F times 1 plus I to the power of negative N? So, just the same. Imo lang, ilisan ang I, R over M, ang N, ilisan lang nimo M times T. Okay? So, substitute lang nimo. So, basically, formula ra gid ka. Okay? Now, the second type of interest. By the way, here, akong gihimuan og table ang M para maklaro, no? So again, ang M is how many times interest will happen. So what if the interest will say compounded annually? So meaning every year it will happen once, or your principal or your investment or your borrowed amount will have an interest once a year. When you say semi-annually, so your M is 2, meaning, say again, semi-annually, there are 2, this will happen 2 times in a year. Quarterly, again, this is, M is 4. So, it will happen 4 times in a year. Monthly, 12 times in a year. Okay? Biannually. So meaning every 2 years. But take note, our reference here is every year. So if it will happen twice a year, so in 1 year, that is 1/2. How about triannually? Triannually, it will happen every 3 years. But take note, a reference is per year. So in 1 year, it will happen 1/3 of a time. Bi-monthly. Bi-monthly meaning um, every 2 months. But in 1 year, you have 12 months. So, if it will happen every 2 months, then you will have M equals 6. So, 2 months will happen 6 times in 1 year. And for daily, it will have M equals 365. So, for 365, this is based on the ordinary year lang. So, dili ang katong leap year. Kung leap year ka, this will be 366. But, for simplicity purposes, we are going to use M equals 365 for daily. Okay, now this is the second type of interest for compound interest. Remember, the first type was called the nominal rate of interest. The second type is called the effective rate of interest or ERI. It means it is the actual rate of interest in 1 year. Okay? So, for this formula, you will determine what is the actual rate in 1 year. So, using the formula, ERI equals 1 plus R over M to the power of M minus 1. Now, why do you need to know? Why do you need to know the actual rate of interest in 1 year? So what's the importance of knowing the actual rate of interest in 1 year? Now remember, compound interest, you have compounded monthly, you have compounded semi-annually, you have compounded quarterly. Now, what if you are given, let's say for example, you are given a interest of compounded monthly and another interest of compounded quarterly. You cannot compare the two because the first one is compounded monthly and the other one is compounded quarterly. So, they have different types of compounding. So, therefore, you cannot compare the two. So, the only way to compare the two is they should be at the same time period. So, using ERI, since ERI can determine the interest in 1 year, if you can get the interest, the equivalent interest per year of the, let's say, compounded monthly and the compounded quarterly, then that's the time you can compare the two. But don't worry about that. I have an example at the last part depicting how to use the effective rate of interest or the ERI. So let's proceed with the examples. Okay, example 1. How much is the amount of 12,800 pesos in 4 years at 5% compounded quarterly? So, basic lang ni nga problem. Basic sample lang sa para hinahinayon lang nato. Okay? So, here's the solution. Given, first, you have of course, the principal or the present amount, which is 12,800 pesos. So, of course, also you have the time, which is 4 years. And the interest, the rate is given at 5%, but take note, it's compounded quarterly. So, since quarterly man, your M is equal to 4. So, we have to find the future amount. Okay? Why man? Anong future amount man ang ipangitaan nga problem? So, if you're going to read properly the example, how much is the amount of 12,800 in 4 years? So, meaning, your present amount of 12,800 will go through 4 years. So, you have to know what will happen after 4 years. So, it means the future amount is asked for this problem. So, given the cash flow diagram here, for the cash flow diagram, you have 12,800 pesos at the start. Okay? Then, after 4 years, how much will be the future amount? So, with this one, using the formula for compound interest, Okay? Here, using the formula, F is equal to P times 1 plus R over M to the power of M times T. Okay? All values are given in the problem already. So, all we just have to do is just substitute the values. So, P, 12,800. 1 plus, the rate is 5% or 0.05. Wherein M is 4 because remember, it's compounded quarterly. So, M is 4. And M times T, so M is 4 and the length of time is 4. So, our future amount will now become 15,614.586 pesos. Okay? So, a very basic example, okay, for compound interest. Next, example number 2. A firm borrows 2,000 pesos for 6 years at 8%. At the end of 6 years, it renews the loan for the amount due. It renews the loan for the amount due plus 2,000 pesos more for 2 years at 8%. What is the lump sum due? So, ano sabi ng lump sum? Lump sum meaning the total or the pila ang natapok ng amount. Sa Bisaya pa. Okay, solution. So, for this example, you have two scenarios. Kung kabantay mo, okay, scenario 1 for 6 years. So, klarohon na to, ang scenario 1, kanang part sa a firm borrows 2,000 pesos for 6 years at 8%. So, that is our scenario 1. What will be the scenario 2? So, ang scenario 2, ang mo proceed nga sentence which is at the end of 6 years. So, meaning, pagkahuman sa imong scenario 1, it renews the loan for another, for the amount due plus 2,000 pesos more for 2 years at 8%. So, paghuman sa 6 years, okay, ang imuhang giborrow nga 2,000, instead of you're going to pay the future amount for the 2,000 pesos after 6 years at 8%, the payment was not made, but it was renewed. Okay? So, instead of paying, the amount was renewed, okay, but added with 2,000 pesos more, and this time for only 2 years. So at first 6 years, then renewed plus 2,000 pesos more for 2 years at the same interest of 8%. So what is the lump sum due? Now, as you can see also, kabantay mo, ang interest here is 8%. Okay? Now, pag inani gani ang problem, ang ihatag lang gani is numerical value. As you can see here, 8%. Sa na sir? Compounded annually, compounded quarterly, compounded semi-annually. Okay? For this one, if you're only given the numerical value, it is safe to assume. Okay? Automatic, standard na siya nga, this 8% will be automatically compounded annually. Okay? So, you have to take note, if there is a problem which is only given the numerical value of the interest rate, automatic compounded annually na siya. Okay, now, so here, if we're going to take out the given in every scenario, so for the first scenario, let's say P1. So, I will name this present worth for the first scenario is 2,000 pesos. Now, also the time for the first scenario is 6 years. The rate for the first scenario is 8% and the compounding is 1. Because again, as I've said, automatic, we're going to assume this as compounded annually. So, M is 1. This is M1 ha, this is M1, okay? M1 siya, sayop ni. M1 eh. Okay, equals 1. For the second scenario, since girenew man siya, no? So, naa na kay bag-o nga present amount. Okay, ang imong present amount will be for the second scenario. Pero, unsa man yung present amount for the second scenario? So, of course, kung pila unta to imuhang bayranan. Kung unsa unta to imuhang bayranan sa first scenario, mo unta imuhang mahimo nga present amount para sa sunod, para sa second scenario. Pero take note nga naapay gipuno nga previous loan plus 2,000 pesos. So, wala man mo bayre, imuhang future amount pag first scenario, instead imuha man gid ninyo, pero gipun-an nimo og 2,000 pesos. So that will be your present worth or the principal for the second scenario. And the length of time for the second scenario is just 2 years. The rate for the second scenario is the same at 8%. But then again, this is compounded annually man, so your M will be 1. So let's proceed with solving the problem using the formula. Okay, before the item mo proceed no sa formula or solving the problem using the formula, I have given here a cash flow diagram. Now, sa cash flow diagram, this is the equivalent cash flow diagram for the whole problem. Now, compulsory ba nga na cash flow diagram? Answer is no. Dili ra necessary or dili ra compulsory nga mag cash flow diagram ka. Giapilan ako ang cash flow diagram, it's because ang cash flow diagram ang good, it will give you a full view of the process of your problem. So, full view meaning from the start until end. So, kung naman kay cash flow diagram, mas magaydan magug ka og asa ka magsugod. Sample dere umuni ang sugod. Nyon sa may sunod, what's next? Then next, what's next? Okay? How will it end? What will be the ending? So, mo na ang purpose sa cash flow diagram. Again, it's not necessary that naagay cash flow diagram in every problem. It will just help you to see the whole flow of your problem. Okay? It's not necessary nga dapat naagay cash flow. Okay, for this one, for the first scenario, for 6 years ang 2,000 pesos. It will undergo 6 years at 8%. Pero, instead nga imuhang bayaran, let's say, F1, wala man mo bayari. Okay? You didn't pay the equivalent future amount, but instead, you renewed your, you renewed the equivalent amount and take note, plus 2,000 pesos. And this is the start for the second scenario. And your second scenario is just 2 years. So after 2 years, you will have another future amount. So this will be what is asked in the problem. What is the lump sum? So at the end of the 8th year or at the end of time for your entire problem, what is the equivalent amount or what is the equivalent future amount? Okay? So, now, first, since there are two scenarios, we have to solve first the future worth of the borrowed amount on the first scenario so that we will know how much did the 2,000 pesos become after. So let's call it F1. Now, kailangan na tumabawaan. Pilam day unta imuhang bayranan or how much you should have paid, okay, from your 2,000 pesos for 6 years. You should know that first because we will need that after for the second scenario. So, since this is just a compound interest, we can directly use the formula. Okay? Direct substitution na ginigid. So, F1 equals P1, which is 2,000 pesos times 1 plus the rate is 0.08 and M is 1 because again, compounded annually. Times M times T, at the power of M times T, you have 1 times 8. But take note, in the future, kung compounded annually, pwede ragid nga wala ning 1. Understood naman na, di ba nga, ay muhang number, let's say 0.08, automatic na nang, understood na nga, nanay 1 sa ubos. Okay? Pwede ra na mo nagdili butangan. Okay? Here sad, pwede ra sa dili mo butangan og 1. Pwede ra diretso na lang kag 8. Okay? Kaya understood naman na, no? Kung naay 1 dere, yan naay 1 diha. So, first, your 2,000 pesos after 6 years, it becomes 3,701.86 pesos. So, mauunta ni imuhang bayranan for the first scenario. This should be your payment for the first scenario. But then again, you did not pay after 6 years, but instead, you renewed your amount. Okay? Now, let's proceed to the second scenario. Okay. Now, let's proceed with the second scenario. So, for the second scenario, then the entire F1 was renewed. Meaning, it was not paid but instead was extended. So, this is the meaning of the word renewed. So, wala nimo bayre, gi-extend lang nimo for another period of time. So, katong mga mamrindahay diha og mga calculator, mga cellphone, suito na kay na sila aning word nga renew. So, let's say, namrinda dito sa backgate sa IT, namrinda dito sa Binglins o calculator. Dili man gani nakawangan og pambayad, prinda og cellphone didto sa may Jerome's Pawn Shop sa may Hungkira. Kung dili man gani, kuan, nakakita ko kayo kayan sa Talisay, kuwangan og kwarta, namrinda og cellphone didto sa Pag-asa Pawn Shop sa Tabunok. Okay? So kana sila mga sweeto na kana sila ana. Now, but take note, this entire F1 or the entire amount after 6 years, there is an additional borrowed amount of 2,000 pesos. Now, for this second scenario, it is just for 2 years. So, in solving for the future amount of the second scenario, so the future amount of the second scenario, let's call it F2. Okay? Now, your F1, so ang previous ni mga amount, will now become the present amount for the second scenario. Okay? Let's call it P2. But take note, ang kanimuhang P2, napa ni additional nga 2,000 pesos. So, using the formula again, F2 equals P2 times 1 plus R2 over M2 to the power of M2 times T2. So, where your present amount for the second scenario is F1, katong imuhang amount from the first scenario, plus the additional of 2,000 pesos. So, your F2 will become, so ang amount pag previous, 3,701.86, plus the additional amount of 2,000 pesos, times 1 plus 0.08 over 1, again, over 1 because it is assumed this is compounded annually, to the power of 1 times time of 2 years. So, you have a final amount of 6,650.65 pesos. Okay? So, this is the equivalent amount after the two scenarios. Now, example 3. So, this is what I've said nga related sa katong ERI nga kung i-explain pagsugod. Example 3, what is the equivalent of 12% compounded semi-annually if converted into an interest rate compounded quarterly? So, meaning, pwede di ay nimo i-convert ang usa ka type sa compounding into another type of compounding. For this example, instead of compounded semi-annually, you will convert it into compounded quarterly. So, from the given, you have 10% compounded semi-annually. That will be your first scenario. Okay? Your second scenario, you don't know what will be the equivalent interest rate, but it will become compounded quarterly. Okay? Now, for this problem, it is basically converting one type of compounding to another type. In this case, it is converting compounded semi-annually to compounded quarterly. So, this example is very important because it will let you know the basic difference of compounding. So, nganong kailangan makaibaw sa diferensya sa compounding. Okay? So, kani, marag, simple lang pag-compare. So, just like comparing 10.5%. Okay? Just like comparing 10.5% compounded annually to 10% compounded semi-annually. Okay? Let's say, for example, kaning duha, 10.5% compounded annually o 10% compounded semi-annually. If we're going to look at the numbers, yes, 10%, 10.5% is higher than 10%. Okay? So, kung number alone, it's very obvious, 10.5 is higher than 10%. But take note, okay? Take note nga, ang 10.5% is compounded annually. Meaning, mag-interest ni siya every year, while ang 10%, yes, mas gamay siya, mas lower siya in value, in numerical value, but it is compounded semi-annually, meaning it will have an interest 2 times a year. Okay? So, klaro na to ha, 10.5%. First, 10.5%, pero it will gain interest only once a year. But the 10% here, okay, yes, it's lower, but it will gain interest twice a year. Question, which one is higher? The 10.5% compounded annually or the 10% compounded semi-annually? Okay? So, mo ni ang difference sa compounding. Yes, kung value lang alone, mas dako ng 10.5%. Pero when it comes to compounding, mas dako man sad si 10% kay semi-annually. So, unsa may buhaton ana? Okay? So, mo na important siya sa pag-determine, this is the importance of determining the difference between compounding. So, this example 3 will directly tackle this kind of question. So, to solve, you will need to determine the actual interest in a year for the different types of compounding and then compare. So, parehas akong giingon before, nga para makahibaw, para ma-compare nimo, kailangan pareha sila og basis. Example, you cannot compare 1 peso pag year 2000 og 1 peso karon, year 2020, because they are basically not the same. Ang piso pag year 2000 makapalit pa ka og so may mapalit mo na daghan pa nga candy, or let's say usa ka buok candy or duha ka buok candy. Pero ang piso karon 2020 mutla makapalit pa kag candy. Or makapalit man gani kag candy pero isa na lang ka buok. So you cannot basically compare the two because they don't have the same basis. Ang usa ang piso pag year 2000, ang usa ang piso pag year 2020. So just like this one, you cannot compare them if they have different compoundings. So makompare na to sila pag the same sila og basis. For this one, kailangan na to makuha pila man day ilahang actual interest in a year. So kung makompare na to ang interest nila in a year, so pareha sa silang basis, yearly na ilang basis. Okay? So again, to solve, you will need to determine the actual interest in a year for the different types of compounding and then compare. So from the recent comparison of 10.5% and 10%, they basically cannot be compared because they have different compoundings. The two of them must be compared to the same and equivalent compounding, and this is where the topic of ERI comes into view. So dili na magamit ang ERI. So from the definition of ERI, this formula will let you know the equivalent rate in 1 year. And this will be the formula to be used in this example 3. Sige, let's proceed with the actual solving of example 3. Okay. First, to convert compounded semi-annually to compounded quarterly, they must have the same yearly rate. So, this will be achieved using ERI. But let's first set compounded semi-annually as scenario 1 and compounded quarterly as scenario 2. So in terms of formula, again, kailangan dapat parehas sila og yearly rate. So imong ERI sa compounded semi-annually equals ERI sa compounded quarterly. Now, mahimo ra nimo ha, you can only use this nga equal sila og ERI if you are going to convert. Okay? Converting ra gyud ni ha kanang equal sila og ERI. Okay? Pero pag compare ka, dili dapat pwede nga pareha sila ERI. Mag-compare man ka. Pero if you're going to convert, they should have the same ERI. Okay, now, recall for the formula for ERI, you have 1 plus R over M to the power of M minus 1. Okay, for the first scenario and for the second scenario. So, substituting the values given for the first scenario, you have the 12% compounded semi-annually. Okay, so how much will it become if it becomes compounded quarterly? So, for this one, using the calculator, we can arrive with R2 equals 0.1182. Or, in terms of percentage, it is 11.82% compounded quarterly. So, meaning, your 12% compounded semi-annually is equivalent to 11.82%, but this time compounded quarterly. So, this is the conversion. So 12% compounded semi-annually can be converted to 11.82% compounded quarterly. So this is example number 3.